I've always believed that the higher the building, the more shadows it casts. The same is true for powerful people. They walk with spotlights on their faces, but behind them lies nothing but darkness, an endless stretch of secrets, manipulation, and invisible bodies they've stepped on to get where they are. I learned that lesson the hard way the night my entire world split in half. The charity gala was supposed to be a celebration, my promotion, my wife's new business venture, and a small taste of the life I'd been breaking my back to build. We arrived dressed like a picture-perfect couple. She wore a shimmering silver gown that clung to her like moonlight. I wore the only suit I owned that made me look like I actually belonged in a room full of high-society predators. Everything about the night felt scripted. Soft orchestral music, flashing camera lights, servers carrying trays of champagne, and executives laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. The whole world smelled like money, confidence, and well-hidden arrogance. Then my boss approached. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a heavy, rehearsed gesture meant to look fatherly to everyone watching. His smile was polished, but his eyes were sharp enough to cut glass. "I need a word," he murmured. I followed him toward a quieter corner near the massive ice sculpture. My wife came with us, still smiling politely, unaware of the storm that would soon strike. He didn't bother lowering his voice. "After the gala," he said calmly, "your wife will go home with me. If she doesn't, you're fired." My brain blanked. My heart hammered so loud I could barely hear the music anymore. I turned to my wife. She didn't look shocked. She didn't flinch. She didn't question him. Instead, with a casual shrug, like agreeing to pick up groceries, she said. With no doubt. My legs nearly gave out. The floor seemed to vanish beneath me. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't even think. My wife had just agreed to walk out with my boss. My future, my dignity, my marriage, discarded like trash. I felt 1,000 eyes on me. Although the room was still chatting and laughing, somehow the three of us felt like the center of a silent circus. I swallowed the fire in my throat and said, very quietly. "Wait a minute." My wife rolled her eyes. My boss smirked like he'd already won. But I didn't give either of them the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. I walked away, calmly, deliberately. But inside me? A storm was rising. I slipped into a hallway behind the stage, away from the chandelier lights and polished marble floors. My breath came out shaky, my fists clenching and unclenching. I felt betrayed, humiliated, burned alive from the inside. But pain has a strange way of sharpening instincts. And in that moment, my instincts screamed one thing. If they want to expose you, expose them louder. Everyone had secrets. Especially at my company. I reached the small storage room where I had placed something earlier that afternoon, an object I initially brought for a completely different reason. I never imagined I'd use it like this. But now it felt like fate had placed it in my hands. I grabbed the locked case, heavy and cold, and carried it back toward the ballroom. As I approached the doors, my heartbeat steadied. My mind stopped spinning. My steps became confident. Revenge didn't make me calmer, it made me focused. I pushed the wide double doors open. The gala was still glittering, wrapped in fake laughter and polished manners. My boss was sipping champagne, my wife beside him, not even pretending to be embarrassed. The sight of them standing there, side by side, was a knife in my chest. But pain wasn't going to break me tonight. Not anymore. I walked straight to the center of the ballroom floor, right under the massive crystal chandelier that had been sparkling over everyone all night. People stared. Conversations faded. My boss frowned. My wife finally looked uneasy. I placed the heavy case on the marble floor, clicked it open, and stood back. For a full second, the world didn't move. Then the reveal made the entire room freeze. Inside the case lay multiple flash drives, a tablet already unlocked, and documents meticulously organized, documents containing years of digital surveillance, financial fraud spreadsheets, recorded conversations, and photographs of secret meetings. Evidence that tied numerous high-ranking executives, including my boss, to embezzlement, bribery, coercion, blackmail, and a scandal so deep it could destroy the entire organization. But that wasn't the part that made people tremble. Next to the documents lay a tiny black device, blinking slowly. A live audio transmitter. Which I had secretly placed in my boss's office months ago, initially to protect myself from his manipulative tactics. But tonight, it had captured something far more explosive. Right on cue, the speakers around the ballroom crackled. And then his voice filled the entire hall. "After the gala, your wife will go home with me. If she refuses, he's fired." People gasped. Some covered their mouths. My boss's face drained of color. My wife's eyes widened in horror as every person in that glamorous room turned toward her. But the audio kept playing. My wife's voice echoed next. With no doubt. Silence engulfed the ballroom. A suffocating silence. You could feel the shock turning into judgment, then disgust, then fear. Not for me. But for what this meant. Executives looked at each other with panic, realizing their own secrets might be in that case too. The orchestra stopped playing. The servers froze mid-step. My boss took a step toward me, trying to muster his authority, but he couldn't hide the terror on his face. "What have you done?" he whispered harshly. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves. The audio spoke for itself. The truth was louder than any explanation I could have given. My wife shook, her perfectly painted mask cracking for everyone to see. People weren't trembling because of a scandal. People were trembling because they knew everything was about to blow up. Because if a single executive fell, all of them might. The ballroom descended into chaos. Not the loud, panicked chaos of screaming or running. The cold, paralyzing chaos of people realizing their entire lives might collapse. Phones came out. Whispers spread like wildfire. A few guests backed away from my boss as if he were radioactive. Security entered, confused and wary, unsure who they were supposed to protect or arrest. My boss lunged toward me. "You're finished," he snarled through gritted teeth. I smiled, calmly, quietly. "You already tried to finish me. Now it's my turn." He swung at me, but security grabbed him before he could reach me. His face twisted with rage and fear as he was restrained in front of hundreds of witnesses. My wife approached next, her voice trembling. This doesn't mean anything. You're overreacting. We can fix this." I raised my hand to silence her. "You made your choice tonight." Her mouth opened, then shut again. Because she could see it, really see it, that something inside me had shattered beyond repair. The betrayal didn't just break my trust. It rebuilt me. Into someone who no longer cared about saving a marriage that was already dead. Into someone who no longer feared people who thrived on intimidation. Into someone who understood that if they wanted to play with darkness, I could bring a whole storm. I turned away from her. Security handcuffed my boss. Executive board members began frantically making calls. The gala was collapsing under the weight of secrets that had spent years hiding under designer suits and expensive perfume. But the night wasn't over. Not even close. Because the case I opened didn't just contain evidence. It contained triggers. Strategically timed messages, auto emails, scheduled releases, and more. And in the next few hours, as the night unfolded, people would tremble far more than they were trembling now. Their careers. Their reputations. Their relationships. Their empires built on corruption. Everything would begin to crumble. Because the truth I unleashed wasn't just a spark. It was a wildfire. And it was only beginning to burn. For a long moment after the audio finished playing across the gala hall, no one dared to speak. No one dared to breathe. Even the chandelier lights seemed to flicker under the weight of the truth that had just detonated in the room. My boss, red-faced and trembling, was still being held back by security. My wife stood frozen, her perfect image shattered in front of 100 witnesses. The executives huddled in corners, whispering, calculating, panicking. But I was calm. Almost frighteningly calm. Because the wildfire I ignited was only at stage 1. I reached down, tapped the small device inside the open case twice, and slid it back into my pocket. A soft clicking sound echoed through the ballroom. The doors. All of them. Every single exit, front, side, staff, you name it. They locked. From the inside, an observer might have thought it was a glitch. But I knew better. Hours earlier, I'd piggybacked a signal through the venue's wireless system. It wasn't sophisticated. Just enough to activate the emergency lockdown protocol meant to keep intruders out. Tonight, it would keep monsters in. Someone screamed. "What's happening? The doors, they're locked. This isn't normal." I watched fear ripple through the room like a drop of blood spreading across water. My boss shouted, "Open the goddamn doors." Security tried. They failed. Panic rose. Whispers turned to shouts. Sweat gleamed on $1,000 suits. People pulled at the handles, shook them, banged on them. The mighty, wealthy elite, suddenly trapped in their own fortress. If they wanted power, they were about to choke on it. I walked toward the stage, ignoring the madness unfurling behind me. My wife reached out to grab my arm, but I pulled away as if her touch were poison. She whispered, "Please, stop this, we can fix." "There's nothing left to fix," I said. "Only things to finish." I stepped onto the stage, picked up the microphone, and tapped it once. The booming echo silenced the frantic mob. Every head turned toward me. Hundreds of eyes. Fear-filled. Desperate. Accusatory. My boss spat, "You're insane. You'll go to jail for this." I smiled. "Maybe. But you'll go first." Then I connected the tablet to the projector. One swipe. One click. And the entire wall-sized screen lit up with folders. Audio recordings. Surveillance footage. Embezzlement ledgers. HR coercion reports buried by the executives. Blackmail notes. Threat messages. Affairs. Abuse. Fraud. Everything they'd hidden behind their shiny charity smiles. The crowd gasped in horror. Someone yelled, "Shut it down." Another screamed, "Cut the power." But they couldn't. I'd already overloaded the hall's control system. Nothing short of a full building outage could stop the show. And the show had only begun. The first video played automatically. My boss, sitting at his desk, bragging to another executive about how easily he manipulated employees, including me. How he crushed anyone who resisted him. How he used threats to force wives, interns, and assistants into compromising situations. Gasps erupted. Someone fainted. One executive's wife slapped him across the face. It was beautiful. Dead silence followed the clip. Then the next played. And the next. And the next. 20 years of corruption. 20 years of ruin. 20 years of sins wrapped in suits and ties now laid bare for the world, or, at least, this trapped room, to witness. The people who once carried themselves like kings now shook like leaves in a storm. I didn't need to touch them. The truth was doing the damage for me. The room turned on itself. Executives shouted at my boss. You dragged us into this. You said everything was deleted. You told us he was harmless. You promised. My boss, now desperate, pointed at me, veins bulging. He's lying. He fabricated all of this. But the audio recordings left no room for lies. The walls echoed with his own cruelty, his threats, his schemes. And then, my wife's voice played. A private recording. One I had avoided listening to for months because I was too afraid of what I'd hear. But tonight, the fear was gone. Her voice filled the hall. He's too soft. Too trusting. And honestly, too boring. If the boss wants me, why not? It might help him climb the ladder. He won't fight back. I didn't add this clip to humiliate her. I added it because the room needed to see what I had seen. The truth. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing, hands trembling. People stared at her like she was a ghost. My boss finally broke free from security, lunging at me. I'll kill you. But he didn't reach me. Because the crowd, yes, the same executives who once bowed to him, intercepted him. Not to protect me. But to protect themselves. He had just become the Titanic. And they were scrambling for lifeboats. Two men pinned him down while another ripped the microphone from his tie. Someone shouted, he's responsible for half the crimes in those files. Another yelled, he threatened my family. The room had turned into a court of wolves. And they were hungry. The sprinklers turned on. Not water. Confetti. Real, metallic confetti. I had connected the ballroom's celebration trigger to auto-fire at the end of the broadcast. Gold and silver flakes rained down like mockery from the heavens. People screamed, thinking something had exploded. My boss thrashed like a man drowning. My wife sobbed uncontrollably. Executives formed circles, whispering, no, bargaining, trying to find a way out of the disaster without being consumed by it. But it didn't matter. Because the final blow was coming. My tablet screen lit up. Autosend initiated. Delivering files to Federal Corporate Crime Division. Anti-Corruption Bureau. National media outlets. Labor rights investigation teams. Whistleblower Protection Network. The room erupted in chaos. Phones vibrated across the ballroom. Dozens. Hundreds. 1,000 notifications pinged like funeral bells. Because they all just received proof that the empire they'd built was rotten to its core. I set the tablet down. I walked toward the center of the hall, confetti swirling at my feet like ashes from a collapsing kingdom. My boss screamed my name, throat raw, face twisted with hatred and terror. You ruined everything. No, I said softly. You did. The lockdown system automatically released after the broadcast finished. The doors clicked open. Not with panic this time. With silence. Horrifying, paralyzing silence. No one tried to stop me. No one dared to speak to me. No one even looked me in the eyes. They were too afraid. I walked past security. Past trembling executives. Past women crying in shock. Past men on their knees, clutching their heads. Past my wife. She reached out with shaking fingers, barely whispering, please, don't go. I didn't stop. I didn't look at her. I walked out of the ballroom and into the cold night air. And behind me? The empire I'd spent 10 years serving fell apart in one night. Not with bombs. Not with blood. But with truth. Savage, merciless truth. The headlines were relentless for weeks. Massive corporate scandal exposes web of crimes. CEO, executives arrested in midnight raid. Whistleblower triggers largest anti-corruption case in a decade. My name never appeared publicly. The evidence spoke for itself. The whistleblower laws protected me. My wife tried contacting me for months, letters, calls, messages. I never replied. She now lives with the consequences of her own choices. As for me, I moved to a small coastal town far from the skyscrapers, far from the politics, far from the shadows. I didn't become rich. I didn't become famous. I became free. And sometimes, late at night, when the waves crash against the rocks and the wind howls through the windows, I remember the moment the ballroom doors locked behind me. The moment the screen lit up. The moment the empire trembled. And destroyed itself. Because in the end, you don't have to lift a sword to end a kingdom. You just have to pull away the curtain.